I was still in the driveway when my phone buzzed. I had just watched my daughter's car disappear around the corner, taillights fading into the gray Tuesday morning, and I was standing there the way you do after someone leaves, not quite ready to go back inside, not quite sure what to do with the quiet. 43 years I'd lived in that house. The oak tree by the mailbox was a sapling when my wife and I moved in. I know every creak of every floorboard. And yet, standing on the driveway that morning, something felt off in a way I couldn't name. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lou Parrish, who had been trimming my hedges and tending my yard every week for going on 11 years. Lou, who brought me soup when I had my hip replaced 2 winters ago. Lou, who never texted me about anything except which day he was coming to mow. The message said, "Don't go back inside. Call me first. I saw something yesterday I need to tell you." I read it twice. Then I walked to the end of my driveway and sat down on the stone wall my late wife Carolyn had built with her own hands the summer before she got sick. And I called him. He picked up on the first ring. "I wasn't sure how to do this," he said. "I've been up since 4 trying to figure out if I was overstepping." "Lou, just tell me." He took a breath. "Yesterday I was working on the back beds near the basement window, the one that's low to the ground by the rhododendrons. Your daughter and her husband, they didn't know I was there. They were inside and the window was cracked open." He paused. "I heard them talking about you, about the house, about what happens when you're gone." My chest went still. "They were talking about transferring the deed," Lou said. "Something about getting you to sign while you were tired or confused. Her husband was saying it needed to happen before your birthday in March because of some kind of estate threshold. He kept saying, the old man won't question it. He trusts her completely." I sat on that stone wall for a long time after I hung up. The oak tree across the street had gone bare weeks ago, and the branches looked like cracks in the sky. "The old man won't question it." I want to tell you I was surprised. I want to say my first thought was Lou must have misheard, or there must be an explanation. But the truth is, I had been feeling something for nearly 6 months that I kept pushing down because I didn't want to be the kind of father who suspects his own child of anything. There were little things. A question here, a suggestion there. My daughter asking twice whether I had a financial advisor I actually trusted. Her husband Garrett sitting with me one evening and talking about how complicated it was for families who didn't plan ahead, how he'd seen it cause such heartbreak. I thought he was being thoughtful. I thought he cared. My daughter's name is Ivy. She was born on a November afternoon when the leaves were still on the ground, and I remember holding her in the hospital room thinking I would do anything to make sure she had a good life. And I did. I worked 31 years as a civil engineer for the county. Nothing glamorous, nothing that would make headlines. I just showed up every day and did my job and saved what I could, and when the pension came in alongside Carolyn's life insurance, I was comfortable. Not rich. Comfortable. The house was paid off. I had a modest investment account. I had about $400,000 in a trust I'd set up a few years after Carolyn passed, with the intention of leaving it to Ivy and to charity in equal parts. Ivy knew about the trust. I had told her myself over dinner one Sunday because I believed families should be transparent about these things. I believe that honesty built trust. That word sits differently in my mouth now. I did not go back inside the house that morning. I drove to a diner 2 towns over and ordered coffee and eggs and sat in a corner booth until I could think clearly. I'm 67 years old, and I've had enough hard conversations in my life to know that how you respond in the first hour matters. If you move too fast, you make mistakes. If you move too slow, so do other people. I called my attorney from the parking lot. Her name is Dolores, and she has handled my legal affairs for 15 years, and she is the kind of person who does not panic and does not waste words. I told her everything. Lou had told me. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Don't sign anything. Don't tell them you know. And come see me tomorrow morning at 8. That was the hardest instruction to follow. Don't tell them you know. Because I was supposed to have dinner with Ivy and Garrett that very night. I went. I sat at their kitchen table and I ate the pot roast Ivy made, and I listened to Garrett talk about his company's Q4 numbers, and I watched my daughter pour wine into my glass and smile at me, and I thought, I taught you to ride a bike on the sidewalk in front of that house. I stayed up with you when you had nightmares. I drove 14 hours straight when your first apartment flooded so I could help you move your things. And I felt something I don't have a clean word for. Not anger, not grief, not betrayal. Exactly. Something that sits underneath all three. Garrett brought it up over dessert. Casually, the way you bring up weather. Dad, I've been meaning to ask you, have you had a chance to look at those documents I emailed last week? Just some basic estate planning stuff, updating the deed to add Ivy as co-owner. It's really just paperwork. Makes things easier for everybody if something were to happen. I looked at him. Then I looked at my daughter. She was looking at her plate. I'll take a look this week, I said. I've just been busy. Garrett smiled. Of course, no rush. We just want to make sure everything is in order while you're healthy and sharp. While you're healthy and sharp. As if the clock was already running. I drove home that night and sat in the dark of my living room for a long time. The house was quiet, the way houses are when you've lived alone in them for years. A particular kind of quiet that you either make peace with or never do. I had made peace with it, but that night it felt like something else. It felt like the silence before something breaks. The next morning I was in Dolores' office at 8 sharp. She had already started digging. The deed transfer they're describing, she said, setting down a legal pad, if signed, would make Ivy a joint tenant with right of survivorship. Which means when you pass, the property bypasses probate entirely and goes straight to her, which means it also bypasses whatever you have written in your trust regarding charitable giving. She looked at me over her glasses. This house is worth what now, in this market? Appraised last year at $680. And your trust specifies? Half to Ivy, half to the children's wing at St. Michael's, the hospital where Carolyn spent her last weeks. Dolores nodded slowly. So if this deed transfer goes through, and you pass without changing the trust, Ivy gets the house outside the trust, which effectively doubles her share of your estate and eliminates the charitable gift, unless you specifically amend the trust to account for it. I had not thought through the exact mechanics. I'm an engineer, not an attorney. But when she laid it out like that, it clicked into place with the cold precision of something that had been designed. He's the one driving this, I said. Garrett, he knows exactly what he's doing. Do you want to know something interesting? Dolores said. She turned her computer screen toward me. Garrett filed for an LLC in Delaware 4 months ago. I found it in public records. The registered agent is a property management company out of Scottsdale. I stared at the screen. He's planning to rent it out. That's speculation, she said carefully. But it's not an unreasonable inference. I thought about the Sunday dinners. The way Garrett always made sure to refill my glass. The way he called me Dad before I had ever invited him to. Here's what I did not do. I did not call Ivy screaming. I did not confront Garrett. I did not post anything on Facebook, or call my brother Leland to vent about it. I have watched enough families tear themselves apart over money to know that the first strike almost never wins, and the second strike usually makes everything worse. What I did instead was spend 3 weeks being very calm and very agreeable, while Dolores and I worked quietly in the background. I amended my trust. Significantly. The house was moved into an irrevocable trust with St. Michael's Hospital named as the remainder beneficiary, with a provision allowing me to live there for the rest of my life. The investment account was restructured. I reduced Ivy's share from 50% to 25%, and I redirected the rest to 3 charities that Carolyn had loved: the Literacy Foundation, the Animal Shelter on Route 9, and a college scholarship fund in her name that I'd always meant to set up and never had. Dolores also advised me to document everything. I had a small home security system already, with cameras in the living room and the front door. I added 2 more. I started keeping a log: dates, times, conversations, every document Garrett emailed, every casual suggestion he made about my health or my plans. The email that finally made me exhale came from Dolores 3 weeks later. She had connected with a colleague in Scottsdale who confirmed that the LLC Garrett had registered was actively seeking property management contracts. She had also, on my behalf, quietly reached out to a forensic accountant who reviewed the financial documents Garrett had been sending me. The deed transfer paperwork was real. It was professionally drafted. This was not a moment of poor judgment. It was a plan. I invited Ivy to lunch. Just the 2 of us, on a Saturday at a cafe near the library that she and Carolyn had both loved. I got there early and got a table by the window and ordered tea and watched people walk by on the sidewalk carrying coffee cups and walking dogs and living their ordinary Saturday morning lives. And I thought about how much of ordinary life is just that, ordinariness that you don't know to be grateful for until it's complicated. Ivy came in looking a little tired. She kissed my cheek and sat down and ordered a salad and asked how I was sleeping, and I said fine, and asked about her book club, and she said she'd been too busy to go lately. And then I put an envelope on the table. I had Dolores update my estate documents, I said. I thought you should know. She looked at the envelope. Okay. I also moved the house into a trust, so there's nothing to transfer in terms of the deed. That door is closed. She went very still. I kept my voice level. I wasn't angry anymore. I had been, in the dark of my living room those first nights. I had been furious in the way you are furious at something you cannot quite believe is real. But by the time I sat across from my daughter at that cafe table, what I felt was mostly sadness. Not the shark kind, the other kind, the kind that settles into your bones and stays. I know about the LLC, I said. I know about the plan to transfer the deed before my birthday in March. I know Garrett drew up the paperwork. And I know that you knew. She didn't deny it. That was the part that surprised me. She didn't perform outrage or confusion. She looked at the table and her jaw tightened and she said, very quietly, "He said it was just protecting our future, that you had more than you needed and it was just sitting there." "It's my home," I said. "It's the house where your mother died. It's where we brought you home from the hospital." She looked up at me then and her eyes were wet. "I know." "Was any of it real?" I asked. "The dinners, the calls, was any of it you, or was it all just?" "It was real," she said. "I'm real. I let him convince me it wasn't a big deal, that you wouldn't mind, that you'd want us taken care of." She wiped her eye. I didn't let myself think about what it actually was. I looked at my daughter for a long moment. 67 years old, and I have learned that people are rarely purely one thing. She wasn't a villain. She was a woman who had loved someone who was, and she had made herself small enough to follow him somewhere she shouldn't have gone. I know that doesn't excuse it. But it changes what I felt sitting there. "Garrett and I need you to know that the estate is settled, and it's not changing," I said. "Not for pressure, not for persuasion, not for anything. Dolores has everything documented, and she has instructions for what to do if anything unusual happens, medically or otherwise. I want you to understand that clearly." Ivy nodded. She looked like she hadn't slept well in weeks. "And I want you to think hard," I said, "about what kind of marriage you're in." She didn't answer that. I didn't expect her to. I paid for lunch. I drove home. I called Lou on the way and told him what had happened. Not all of it, but enough. And I thanked him in the way you thank someone when words feel inadequate. Lou said, "You're not just a client, you know. You're a good man. Carolyn would be proud." I had to pull over for a minute after that. That was 8 months ago. Ivy and I are still in contact, though things are different. Careful in a way they weren't before, like a bone that healed slightly wrong after a break. Garrett moved out of their house in the spring. I don't know all the details and I haven't asked. I heard from Ivy's cousin that he had done something similar with money from Ivy's own accounts, and that she was dealing with the fallout in ways I can only imagine. The house is still mine. On a clear night I can sit on the back porch and see the stars, the way you can only see them when you've lived somewhere long enough to know where to look. The rhododendrons came back in April, big and purple and riotous the way Carolyn always liked them, and Lou came on a Tuesday morning and trimmed them back just enough, the way he always has. He brought me coffee from the place down the road. We sat on the stone wall for a while and didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Some people show you who they are in ordinary moments. In 11 years of showing up every week, in a text message sent at 6 in the morning because they didn't know what else to do. Some people show you who they are in a different kind of moment. I have learned at 67 to pay attention to both. I've been sitting with this story for 8 months now, and the thing that stays with me isn't the deed transfer or the LLC or even the look on Ivy's face when I put that envelope on the table. What stays with me is the stone wall. Carolyn built it herself the summer before she got sick, hauled the stones from a pile at the back of the property, set each one by hand. She said she just wanted something that would last. I've sat on that wall through some of the hardest moments of my life, and it held me every time. Some things are built to hold. Some things only look like they are. I think about cause and effect a lot more than I used to. Not in any mystical sense. I'm an engineer. I believe in load-bearing structures. I believe that what you put into a foundation determines what the whole thing can carry, and when I look back honestly at how we got here, I can see the weight that had been building long before Lou sent me that text message. I had built my relationship with Ivy on unconditional trust, which is a beautiful thing, until someone else figures out how to use it as a tool. That's not Ivy's fault entirely, but it's not nobody's fault either. Garrett understood exactly what he was working with when he walked into that family. What I know now is that real integrity, the kind that holds under pressure, doesn't announce itself. It shows up on an ordinary Tuesday morning in a text from a man who had every reason to stay out of it. Lou didn't stand to gain anything from warning me. He stood to lose a client, to create awkwardness, to get pulled into something messy that wasn't his business. He did it anyway because he's the kind of person who does the right thing when it costs him something. That's the only version of character that means anything, the kind that shows up when nobody's watching and nothing's in it for you. And I think about the clear-headedness it took to not blow everything up in the first hour. I'm not patting myself on the back. I wanted to. I wanted to drive straight to their house that morning and put every card on the table. But I've lived long enough to know that acting from the rawest part of your anger rarely gets you where you actually need to go. The smarter move was the harder one. Stay calm, get counsel, document everything, and let the situation develop until I had something that couldn't be argued with. That kind of patience isn't passivity. It takes more out of you than the fight would have. What I want anyone to take from this, if you're a parent, if you're someone who has loved people deeply and built something and hoped it would be enough, is that the work doesn't stop. It never stops. You have to stay sharp about who is in your life and why. You have to be willing to ask hard questions about the people closest to you, even when the answers might break something. Especially then. Loving someone doesn't mean handing them a blank check and looking away. That's not love. That's avoidance wearing love's face. Ivy and I are still finding our way back to each other. I don't know how far back we'll get, but I know the rhododendrons came in purple this spring, and Lou brought coffee on a Tuesday morning, and I sat on Carolyn's stone wall and felt something that wasn't quite peace but was headed in that direction. You build what you can, you protect what matters, and you pay attention to who shows up when things get hard. That's the whole lesson as far as I can tell.